Being in community is wonderful, and it can be difficult. People have personalities, and they can push your buttons, sometimes even intentionally, sometimes without realizing what they're doing. And when we open ourselves up to others, we become vulnerable to getting hurt and to feeling betrayed. Today we look at a story arc that comes at the end of John's Gospel. Simon, who is so steadfast he got the name the Rock, Peter, ends up distancing himself from Jesus and the other disciples until Jesus calls him back. From God's point of view, no one is disposable. No one is thrown away. We are all welcome to the fold, back into the fold. All who are hungry are invited to come and eat.
Before today's first lesson, I'd like to give some context to where we are in the story thus far. Previously, we met with Jesus at the Last Supper, where he spoke with Simon Peter. He told him that he would deny Jesus thrice before the rooster crowed. We now follow him after his arrest and as he's being dragged off by soldiers to his trial. The soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. They took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the first one who advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of the man's disciples, are you?" Peter said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves. Peter was also standing with them and warming himself. They asked him, You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative to the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment the cock crowed. For a second lesson, we skip forward slightly in the story of John. Now it is past Easter, and the disciples have fished all night. Then, to their surprise, they're met with a resurrected Jesus on the beach and share breakfast with him. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Simon said to Jesus, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." A second time, Jesus said to Simon, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Simon said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Feed my lambs, and then tend my sheep. Jesus said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not go to wish." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me."
Though the most famous verse from the Christian scriptures comes from John's gospel, I'm talking about John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish but have eternal life." Even though that verse comes from the Gospel of John and is quoted probably more than anything else in the Gospels or any of the Christian scriptures, I don't think John is a very quotable gospel. In fact, one of the problems I have with quoting John 13 on a poster at a baseball game, for instance, is that it rips the verse out of its context. Quoting that one verse outside of the narrative John is telling makes it much easier to misinterpret it and to even abuse the verse, and that happens quite frequently. The text is cheapened, and the mystery of the text is lost when it's pulled out of its context. Even the pithiest, most quotable verse in John's gospel belongs in the narrative. Take today's texts. Today's texts are part of a larger story arc. Now, there's a lot that goes on in John's gospel. It takes him 9 chapters to get from Maundy, Thursday through his resurrection stories. It's only 21 chapters long, so he's using 9 of those 21 chapters to get through those 4 days and a few weeks. And part of that's because Jesus has this really long speech that he gives to his disciples. But the main focus of those 9 chapters, as you might expect, is Jesus, is the gospel. The subplot in these 9 chapters focuses, or at least a subplot, focuses on Simon Peter. In chapter 13, when Jesus gathers with his disciples to share a final meal with them and to wash their feet, Jesus tells Simon Peter that he will deny Jesus 3 times before the dawn when the rooster crows. At first, it seems like Simon is going to stick with Jesus. In chapter 18, when soldiers and the police come to arrest Jesus, Simon Peter tries to prevent the arrest. He pulls out a knife of some sort and cuts off the ear of one of the people enslaved by the high priest. Why Simon was not arrested right then by the soldiers and the police that had come to arrest Jesus is beyond me. But there we are. That's how the story goes. They arrest the nonviolent Jesus, not the knife-wielding Simon. Luke and Matthew also say that a disciple cuts off the ear of one of the people that's come to arrest Jesus. Only John says that that person who did that is Peter. And I think it's because John has that story arc in these chapters about Peter. Even though Jesus is hauled off to the high priest's house, according to John, Simon Peter and another unnamed disciple follow Jesus there. Peter isn't able to get into the courtyard of the high priest's house because he doesn't know the right people. The other disciple does, apparently, and he gets Peter brought inside the courtyard. 3 different people, 3 people who really don't have much social status or political power. They ask ask Peter 3 times if he knows Jesus, if he's part of Jesus' posse. And 3 times Peter denies any association with Jesus. And as he makes his 3rd denial, the rooster crows, just as Jesus had predicted it would happen. Chapter 19 ends with Jesus being buried. The Sabbath passes in 1 verse in chapter 20. Then on Sunday, Mary Magdalene, who I like to call Mary the Tower because that's what Magdalene really means. Mary the Tower it's sort of like Simon the Peter, Mary the Magdalene, Peter the Rock, Mary the Tower. Goes to the tomb. Mary goes to the tomb and finds that the stone has been rolled away. Somebody's been messing with Jesus' tomb. So she goes back to Simon and the unnamed disciple, and they rush out to the tomb to see what's happened. That evening, the resurrected Jesus appears to the disciples who are hanging out together inside a locked room behind locked doors. The following week, following Sunday, Jesus makes another appearance to the disciples who've gathered again behind locked doors. Thomas missed the first one, but he was there for the second one. Simon Peter is there for both of them. And then we get to chapter 21. Some time has passed. It's not clear how much. Jesus has made some additional appearances to the disciples as the resurrected one. John doesn't give us any details. I get the impression that for the disciples, things are sort of in a limbo, that they're directionless. Jesus shows up, but then nothing else really happens. So Simon tells the disciples that he's with that he's going to go fishing, and the others join him. Apparently, it's evening when this happens. The text says that they fished all night and caught nothing. I've long heard this story as one about a directionless disciple, maybe even a disciple who's feeling somewhat guilty about having denied even knowing Jesus right then when he was facing persecution, when he most needed a friend. He goes to the thing that he knows how to do. In that sense of being directionless, he goes and does the thing that he knows. He goes fishing, and others go with him. Maybe they don't have an idea of what to do either. While they're out in the boat fishing, the resurrected Jesus shows up on the beach. He gives the disciples some instructions about where to fish, and suddenly they catch so many fish it almost rips the nets apart. They go ashore and they see a charcoal fire. Jesus has made them breakfast. Once they're done with breakfast, Jesus talks directly to Simon Peter. And he asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Simon Peter says, "You know that I love you." And 3 times Jesus gives Simon Peter an instruction to tend his flock. Now, a lot of ink has been used to write about the number 3 in this story arc. 3 times Peter denies knowing Jesus, and they see this story as a great act of betrayal and redemption. They see Simon Peter's denial of knowing Jesus as a great sin, and they see Jesus asking Simon 3 times, "Do you love me?" as Jesus wiping away the stain of that sin, of each of those sins, one denial at a time. Now, I see elements of that in this story, but with much less cosmic judgment. What if, when Jesus tells Simon that he will deny Jesus 3 times, it's more directive than predictive? Peter has said that he'll lay down his life for Jesus, and Jesus responds by saying that instead, Simon will deny knowing him. I can hear that as being a recommendation for action as easily as a prediction of fear. It's as if Jesus is saying to him, very soon there will come a moment when the right thing to do, the wise thing to do, the action that will provide you and our movement with a future, is to deny knowing me. I know that as John tells the story, Simon Peter isn't kicked out of the community for denying Jesus. Simon rushes to the tampered tomb when Mary the Tower reports to Simon the Rock that something has happened to that tomb. Simon is locked inside with the other disciples, both times that Jesus reveals himself in the resurrection. Simon the Rock is still enough of a leader that when he says he's going fishing, others say, "We'll come too." If anyone put Simon Peter outside the group after he denied knowing Jesus, it was Simon Peter. I know how easy it is to judge myself, how to judge myself more harshly than other people do, how to judge myself more harshly than Jesus does. And maybe Simon was doing the same thing. And maybe the questions that Jesus asks Simon are about him helping him forgive himself, to help him see himself as worthy of belonging. Now, we miss some subtleties in this story by reading the English translation rather than the original Greek, though we probably couldn't read the original Greek. But in John's gospel was written in Greek, and Greek has a lot of words for love. And this passage uses two of them. Simon, do you love me? Jesus asks. And the first two times he asks, he uses the word agape. Simon, do you agape me? Do you love me with no conditions? Do you love me with a love that sacrifices for another? This is the kind of love that God has for us. And Simon Peter answers, saying that he loves Jesus, but the word that he uses is phileo, brotherly love. I love you as an intimate, but not unconditionally. And when Jesus asks his question the third time, he changes it. The third time he asks him, Simon, do you love me? He uses phileo. I think that Jesus might be saying that while your love is not as complete as God's love is complete, Simon, your love is good enough to be my disciple. And it's only after that third question, do you love me like a brother, that Jesus says, follow me, and gives him instructions for the future. And I think that Simon Peter was right to say phileo. It's as hard as we try, our ability to love without condition is limited to little moments here and there. We hold the ideal of agape love, we're going to mess it up. The good news is that Jesus continues to invite us back in wherever we think, whenever we think we don't belong, whenever we have moved ourselves outside. Jesus continues to love us with agape love and asks us to follow him. This is what being grounded in community is all about. Recognizing that we need to be gentle with one another and with ourselves so that we can be brave together. And we each come in with our pain, with our brokenness, and still every time Jesus invites us back to the table. Thanks be to God. Amen.